Picture this. You're cruising along in the cockpit of a Bombardier Q400. Everything is totally normal, and then, suddenly, alarms start blaring. You've just suffered a complete, total loss of all fluid from your number one hydraulic system. Talk about a high-stakes scenario, right? In a crisis like this, literally every single second counts. You definitely don't have the time to leisurely flip through hundreds of pages in an emergency manual. You need to know exactly what's happening, the precise actions to take, and exactly how to get that aircraft safely on the ground. So today, we're going to decode this intense aviation emergency and make the protocol totally unforgettable. Welcome to this explainer. Our mission today is to break down this complex emergency manual for the Bombardier Q400 and transform it into a structured, super easy to memorize flow. Whether you're a hardcore aviation enthusiast or just someone who's fascinated by how pilots manage extreme, real-world emergencies, we're going to turn these dense, technical procedures into a clear mental roadmap. You'll practically have it memorized by the end of this. Okay, let's dive into this. To master this protocol, we're following the exact chronological sequence a pilot experiences in the cockpit. First, identifying the hydraulic failure. Second, the immediate cockpit action sequence. Third, assessing lost aircraft services. Fourth, the critical landing braking protocol. Fifth, landing speeds and distances. And finally, the final touchdown safety cautions. Section 1. Identifying the hydraulic failure. Before a pilot can do anything, they have to confirm the exact nature of the emergency through their cockpit alarms. To quickly diagnose this crisis, we use a neat little memory trick I call the 4 indicators. It's basically pump, valve closed, and quantity 0. So first, the number 1 engine hydraulic pump caution light illuminates. Second, the number 1 hydraulic isolation valve caution light comes on. Third, you get the engine 1 hydraulic valve closed advisory light. And fourth, the ultimate confirmation, you will see absolutely 0 quantity indicated on the number 1 hydraulic quantity gauge. So remember, pump, valve closed, quantity 0. Now what's really interesting here is a tricky exception that the manual specifically warns us about. You'd probably expect that isolation valve caution light to just stay glaringly bright, right? Well, the manual explicitly notes that the number 1 hydraulic isolation valve caution light might actually go out if the fluid quantity in the system drops to a very low level. You absolutely cannot let that trick you into thinking the problem miraculously fixed itself. It's actually just further confirmation of severe fluid loss. Section 2. Immediate cockpit action sequence. Once those 4 indicators are confirmed, hesitation is just not an option. The pilot has to immediately transition into a rigid set of physical actions to stabilize the aircraft. And this brings us to an incredibly effective memory trick derived right from the manual's checklist. It's the ONNP action sequence. Let's break it down. O. Open the hydraulic number 3 isolation valve. N. Set standby hydraulic pressure to normal. N. Set PTU control to normal. And finally, P. Press the GPWS flap override. But wait, only do that if the flap has failed between 0 and 10. So that's ONNP. Open, norm, press. Lock that acronym into your brain, and you've just effortlessly memorized the immediate required actions. Section 3. Assessing lost aircraft services. Okay, so the pilot has stabilized what they can, but now comes the reality check. What exactly has the Bombardier Q400 lost? To remember these lost services, we use another super simple mnemonic, FBI. F stands for flaps, B stands for brakes, specifically you're losing your normal and anti-skid brakes, and I stands for your inboard and number 1 systems to be exact. That includes the inboard roll spoiler, elevator number 1, and the rudder number 1 system. So if you ever need to quickly recall what goes offline during this failure, just think FBI, flaps, brakes, inboard systems. Section 4, critical landing braking protocol. Knowing that we've lost our normal and anti-skid brakes completely changes how we approach the runway. Preparing for this compromised landing means following some incredibly strict rules. For instance, if your flap is at less than 5, you absolutely must disengage the autopilot at 1,000 feet above ground level. You need your hands firmly on the controls early in the approach because those lost FBI services cause some major aerodynamic changes. Once the wheels touch the ground, you have to stop using the emergency brake. Now, the good news? You have unlimited brake applications available, but there is a very specific rhythmic technique you have to use. The manual dictates intermittent 1-second applications. You apply the emergency brake for 1 second, then release for a brief interval, literally as brief as possible, and repeat. It's this precise pulsing rhythm to safely halt the aircraft, because remember, you don't have the anti-skid system to save you anymore. Section 5. Landing speeds and distances. This mechanical failure instantly turns into a dense math problem for the flight crew. And this brilliantly illustrates the data pilots have to consult during the approach. Depending on where your flaps are stuck, your required speeds completely change. Notice how at flaps 0 and 5, your reference speed is based on your stall speed, or VSR, plus 10. But for flaps 10, 15, and 35, it shifts over to your reference landing speed, or VRF, plus 10. The pilot has to pinpoint their exact flap position just to know how fast they need to fly this compromised aircraft. Let's move to the landing distance factor and see how this builds. Because you're landing faster and you don't have normal brakes, it takes significantly more runway to stop. If you're stuck at flap 0 or 5, you have to use the flap 35 metrics, and your reference speed landing distance factor is multiplied by a massive 2.65. Even at flap 10, 15, or 35, the factor is 1.85. The lost systems drastically multiply the required runway, and checking this data is how the pilot ensures they aren't going to run out of pavement. Section 6. Final touchdown safety cautions. All of this preparation leads up to the final, most critical phase, the exact moment the wheels hit the tarmac. To memorize the manual's strict warnings for touchdown, we use the 6 and 150 rule. The first half of that rule is 6 degrees. The manual explicitly states to avoid pitch attitudes in excess of 6 degrees at touchdown. If the nose is pitched up any higher than that, the risk of striking the tail and damaging the airframe becomes dangerously high. The second half of the rule is 150, specifically 150 knots indicated airspeed. The absolute caution here is that the pilot must not select the power levers below flight idle until the airspeed drops below 150 kIAS. You literally have to wait for that speed to bleed off before pulling those levers back. So, the crucial point is captured perfectly in the manual's absolute warning regarding brake management. We talked earlier about that 1-second intermittent pulsing rhythm for the emergency brakes. Well, why is that so critical? Because as the manual clearly states, excessive application of emergency braking can result in skidding and tire failure. Without anti-skid systems, just holding that brake down will blow the tires instantly, turning a controlled emergency landing into a totally disastrous slide. We've just navigated a high-stress scenario in the Bombardier Q400, pulling directly from the real emergency manual. Think about what we covered today. In the heat of a real emergency, would you remember the 4 indicators? Could you smoothly execute the ONNP action sequence? Would you know your FBI lost services and follow the 6 and 150 touchdown rule? It's honestly fascinating how aviation safety relies on structuring these highly complex life-or-death situations into precise, repeatable steps. Keep these mnemonics in mind, and you'll always understand exactly what's happening behind the cockpit door when the pressure's on.